Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of PTR Perspective. I am at the Green Auto Summit in Stuttgart, Germany, and we are continuing our discussions with the experts at the conference. And my next guest is Mr. Matt Ersin, who is a senior director at Fastned. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Matt, why don't you quickly start off with a quick introduction of yourself, your journey in the e-mobility industry, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers already know about Fastned, but maybe things about the company as well.
With pleasure. I joined Fastned nearly 2 years ago as a senior director for government and public affairs. And I lead a team of 12 professionals in my department. And I believe we are the largest public affairs department in our ecosystem in e-mobility, at least in Europe. And we are very proud of it because we see ourselves not only as a company with intentions to make profit, obviously, but also as a force spearheading the transition to e-mobility with the aim of supporting the transition of road transportation to a zero-emission sector by 2035. That's our mission as Public Affairs Department.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. First question about the policies in the region. Do you think there are some pressing issues, there are gaps that need to be filled right away? Or do you think that what we already have is a good base and it will take some time for us to sort of, move to the next steps? Or do you think, no, there are some, things that we need to resolve right away from a policy standpoint?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we have two major pieces of legislation that is extremely relevant for the transition. One is obviously the 2035 target to have a carbon-free, at least net zero emission road transportation by 2025. That is the consensus and as of today, the law in the European Union and also in the UK. That date is also there. So it's very important that we maintain this 2035 goal, objective and regulation. And do not open up these targets to renegotiation because that will create uncertainty for investments in the charging infrastructure, but also in the EV sector and wider ecosystem that includes also other areas like battery technologies and everything that is connected to our ecosystem. So that part is very important.
Right.
The second part is, of course, at the European Union level, the so-called AFIR, Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, that set up specific numeric targets to deploy the charging infrastructure. That's already on the way. So that is also happening. So these two elements are key elements. And the next aspect that we need to support is, of course, policies that make the transition affordable for people, that make it easier to switch from internal combustion engine cars to electric vehicles. So that aspect is also very, very crucial for next years.
And you expect the evolution in these policies, existing policies, or do you think there will be offshoots from these policies? Certain tangents would be drawn from these existing policies, or do you think there's need for, let's say, slow evolution so that different countries are following the regulations, or they're kind of the targets are set for themselves and they're able to see this as something that they need to achieve by 2030? Do we need to define further steps how to get there essentially?
Yeah, well, those steps are actually already defined, right? We have steps already. Next date is 2025. We have targets for 25. We have targets for 30 and then 35. So these steps, the evolution is already foreseen, and we already have this plan for several years, and different players and actors and stakeholders, OEMs have already taken the necessary steps. Others did not, and we hear more about or from them actually try to put everything in question. But it's very important that we maintain these objectives, and this is going to be, of course, an evolution. And there are other additional steps that can be taken. For example, one of them is the initiative by the European Commission called Greening of Corporate Fleets. That will be, if that happens, that will be an additional support towards this goal, because what it means that if we incentivize the larger corporations in Europe to switch to electric fleets, those cars find themselves in the second-hand market. So that resolves partially the question of access to affordable cars. That is one of the main obstacles in the transition in Europe.
Right. Let's talk about EU's tariffs on Chinese EVs and components. How do you see this? What's the impact of this on the overall e-mobility market?
Yes. Well, we talk a lot about China, but there are other countries as well who are much more advanced. We are lagging behind in Europe. The United States, South Korea, Japan, they all are going full speed towards electrification of their industries. So we are lagging behind. Obviously, anything that we decide at European level regarding imports from China can be only a patch. That can be only a solution for the next few years to win time for our industries, for our automotive industries, basically to get their act together and to invest in the supply chains, to make sure that we invest in battery technologies, battery productions in Europe, and to make sure that we are able to put in the market affordable electric vehicles and to be able to compete with the Chinese. So those tariffs might be necessary, I understand them, but they are not going to resolve the problem in 2, 3, 5 years. If we do not do our homework, we will end up with an automotive industry that is not going to be competitive in the long term globally.
So in your mind, this is like a short-term solution, which might help?
Well, it might help those who are lagging behind because others are not lagging behind. We have several brands and OEMs who took the necessary steps and are planned and have planned and are bringing different car models into the market, but still more needs to be done in that respect. But yes, I mean, what will happen is with these tariffs, the imported cars produced in China will become a bit more expensive. So that will take away their competitive edge in the European market. But again, this is not going to solve our competitiveness problem globally. We need to, in these next few years, take those steps and invest in Europe. And at governmental level, we need to support those investments.
And what's the weakest link in your mind for Europe? Is the battery? Is it the components? What's the weakest link where the most amount of effort needs to be put in to get EU next to, likes of China, or you mentioned US?
Well, we are lagging behind, yes, in different aspects, but battery is a major element. Battery production, battery technologies, obviously the cost of a car, I don't have the exact percentage, but the big part of the cost of producing an EV is the battery, honestly. But then that brings us to access to the raw materials, to mining. So that requires also additional efforts by the governments, the European governments at the European Union level to make sure that we have access to those raw materials in different countries. So agreements needs to be negotiated with those countries. So there is a lot to be done.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, what do you think about the overall like a political backlash, that is expected against the climate change priorities, change in priorities? What's your take on this?
Well, the topic of transition to e-mobility has been regarded in last years mostly from an environmental aspect due to the urgency of climate change, and that point is still valid. But the political change and the shift that we have seen in Europe during the European elections, but also at national levels, we have more and more governments that have, let's say, are less sensitive to the environmental topics. But what is important is that these issues are not only, yes, they are also necessary in terms of climate change, but this is also about securing jobs. So making sure, as I said, that our automotive industry in Europe remains competitive. This is about our infrastructure. We're talking about electrification needs also for other sectors, not only for mobility. This is also about energy sovereignty. So it's about security at the end of the day. So when we talk with governments, we as Fastned, we also, our politicians, also from different political backgrounds, we underline all these different aspects, starting from climate change needs up to energy sovereignty and a just transition that that does not leave any parts of the population behind. So that part is also quite important for us.
So it's a matter of reiterating this, ensuring that everyone is educated that this is something that it's a reality that we have to move towards electric future in terms of transport. So it's really educating everybody that this cannot be taken off the table.
Yeah, well, I don't use the word educating when we're talking with politicians and governments, but at least we're pointing to those aspects. So this is about environment, this is about jobs, this is about competitiveness, this is about industrial policy, infrastructure, it's about energy. All those things are linked. It's also about social justice in a certain way. That's also something that remember, because if we are talking about making cars affordable and also charging affordable for everyone, because we're not looking into the high income segment of the populations only. So we're talking about a just transition. That's what we mean. So we have all these different components of the discussion that I think needs to be put on the table and not forgotten.
You mentioned, Matt, jobs. How alarming is the situation in terms of availability of skilled personnel in this industry overall, in automotive as well as in the energy sector? Do you think that is potentially becoming a roadblock in terms of the region achieving its goals?
Absolutely. There is a risk for that. We need also to invest in people, making sure that we have the available workforce. I think that we have already 16 million people working in jobs related to the automotive industry, and that's without counting the energy and other related infrastructure-related jobs. But we are lacking of skilled people in Europe, not only in our industries, but in every field. So, of course, that brings us to topics like migration as well, and also the impact that bringing skilled people from other countries will have on those countries. So there are different aspects of the discussion as well. But of course, we need to have training programs. We need to educate people. We need to make sure that we have skilled people in Europe, so that this does not become a problem,
a roadblock. Got it. Man, I listened to your discussion today, your presentation. You gave a lot of incredible data points. Maybe walk us through Fastned's journey as a CPO. Where does the company stand? You gave some very impressive plans and targets that you have in mind. Maybe share some of these with
pleasure.
Our listeners.
We started this Fastned, our journey, in 2012 in the Netherlands as one of the first chargeport operators. And we expanded to today 9 countries. We're operating in, of course, the Netherlands, but also Germany, France, Switzerland, UK, Denmark, Italy, and Spain now, and expanding further to Austria and Poland in the next few years. We operate currently 312 stations, mostly on high traffic roads, on highways or close to highways, or at the exit of larger cities. We have already secured in total more than 500 locations. So that means that we have signed contracts for those locations, are already building to operate more than 500 in the next couple of years. And we are on the path to reach the magic number, the target that we put ourselves of 1,000 stations by 2030. And I want to underline that this is just not a number, but we are also being very careful on how we select those locations, because we want to make sure that those are prime locations that are accessible publicly to the users. And I think my colleagues at Network Development Department are doing a great job. To give you just a figure that I mentioned earlier in my speech, we have more or less 20% of the stations, fast charging stations in the Netherlands, but 60% of the charging volume is covered by those 20% of the charging stations in Netherlands.
Right.
So that shows that we are doing something right in terms of choosing locations, but also the quality of services and reliability that we provide to the users.
Can we delve a bit deeper into this reliability topic, because this has become one of the key topics in this entire ecosystem? Maybe walk us through the journey. A charger gets installed, or charging station gets installed. What happens throughout its life cycle? What is Fastned doing to ensure that reliability aspect is always there for the end users?
Absolutely. So we have as a strategy, our business model foresees that we try to do as much as possible in-house. So our maintenance teams are Fastned teams. Okay. If something goes wrong in one of our charge chargers in some place, we have our teams traveling and fixing the problem, either remotely if it's a software issue or if it's a physical issue, within actually a couple of days. That does not happen with some of our competitors who maybe have a fuel gas station and then they just add a EV charging point next to it because, well, their station will survive without it. We can't, because we are only in the business of providing energy and only from renewable sources. So for us, it's also in our interest, and also it's in the interest of our customers, knowing that if they drive to a Fastned station, that they are going to find chargers who function, that they can pay for with whatever payment methods that they have. So that brings me also to the point of alternative fuels infrastructure regulation that imposed, the specific payment methods. We were already compliant in most of our stations before, so we didn't need to retrofit because our objective and our business model is based on the best possible user experience. So we want someone who drives to our station to not find any problems when charging on their EVs. And this is why we have customers who come back. So this is very important. Internal maintenance teams, our customer support teams are also internal. They are reachable anytime. We have been always selected in various countries as being one of the most efficient in also customer support, because for many people driving EVs, this is a new experience. At the beginning of this industry. So we need to provide more help than if we were in the business of being oil or just fueling. So people might need more assistance, and we provide that in different languages everywhere. This is very important for us.
So this ease of access and having the best experience for the end customer was already part of the company's philosophy before the regulations came.
Absolutely, because we know that if we make something wrong, this will not only harm us, but our whole industry. And we cannot afford that. We don't want to be part of that. So we want to make sure that we have the highest uptime, the highest reliability rates possible in the industry.
Matt, another question about comparisons between EU as a market versus US. You mentioned that US is moving much faster. We've had some, some news coming out of the US, some companies closing their shop in the recent few weeks or months. How do you see this? One aspect to see this could be that, it's a very fast-paced, situation. So you try fast, you fail fast as well, that kind of a situation. This could be deemed as something good for the industry, that our industry needs to go through this, process. Or do you think there are other factors at play that why do we see some of these differences in European market versus US?
Yes. Well, I'm not very familiar with the details of the American market, but I know that the market dynamics are quite different in the United States. We have a predominant situation of Tesla in the charging sector in the US. The challenges are not the same. We have a very different starting points in Europe in terms of infrastructure, in terms of also fragmentation of markets, the way businesses operate, taxation policies, support policies, it all works quite differently. There are some advantages in operating as a company, as a CPO, I'm sure, in the US that we don't have. But then again, it's not comparable, I would say. Where the US has an advance compared to us is that with the Inflation Reduction Act, even though it's called inflation, it encompasses a lot of different topics. There is a massive investment from the governmental side in infrastructure and everything, basically, from bridges to roads to everything. So we need something similar at European level, and if we do not do that, we will be lagging behind. So we need support. We need all these financial instruments. We need to revise our administrative procedures that are often heavier and more complex. I just want to give an example of the DSOs that we are facing in Europe. We have more than 2,400 different DSOs regarding grid connection applications. Only in Germany, we have 782 DSOs with different procedures, some of them not even digitalized. So that's that whole red tape also is an extra burden that is not existent in the same way in the US. So that's an advantage for them as well. So we have to review also those things. Those are the easier fixes, I would say. but we need also financial support. I'm not asking for financial support necessarily for the charging industry, for CPOs, but for battery investments, for the whole supply chain investments, and also for the users, for people. Subsidies are being phased out. We saw the impact that these had on the German markets. Once those subsidies were phased out, well, obviously, this had an impact. And that's not the right moment. It's too early. We need to also review our taxation policies, the way company cars are being taxed. The only country, as far as I know, in Europe, for example, who has policies in place who incentivize people who drive company cars to switch to EVs is the United Kingdom. And no other countries, none of the EU countries has any policies. So all of these things, I think we can do better. We can do better than the United States varieties, sir.
Thank you so much, Matt. Last question from my side. If you were to pick 2 or 3 key trends that you think will shape our industry in the next 5 to 10 years, these could be technological trends or policy. What key trends do you think will shape this industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, it's also linked to the biggest or one of the biggest obstacles that we face. The biggest question is affordability of cars. So we see people who have the option to choose between an internal combustion engine car and an electric vehicle. Once they choose, they never go back. But we have to make sure that those EVs are affordable for the larger population. So by developing further battery technologies and by making sure that we bring out the supply chain and the production sites in Europe and we support these, that's going to be a game changer for us. So that's, I think, hopefully happening. I hope. We have some bumps on the road, but I think that overall everyone understands, everyone who knows a bit about mobility and is following these topics knows that this is the direction and that we need to take these steps. And I think that this is going to happen. So I'm quite optimistic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for all the insights. And I'm sure that all our listeners and viewers got a lot of insights and information from this. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all. And I will catch you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.